Aw, yes, ladies and gents. Oh, it's 7:05 p.m. PST in the middle of April on the 10th day. This is the year 2013, and this is the Damn Daily. Number 570, where we learn to be a better gamer. In today's daily, we are going to help answer for you a question that I know many Zergies have been having. What the hell do you do in late game ZvP? Used to be Broodlord Infestor. Broodlord's certainly strong. Infestor is not the same that they were in Wings of Liberty. So what to do? Many folk have been trying things like Hydra, Ultralisk, Viper to varying degrees of success. The big issue that keeps arising is when Protosses get that disastrous death army of Tempest, Voidray, Colossus, Archon, and it seems impossible to deal with ordinary units. So today we're going to show you how to deal with it. Oh, wonderful style of play. Introduced to me by none other than ROOTCatZ, who's been doing a lot of experimenting with that. So in other words, today's daily is how to win late game ZvP without Broodlords. Brief announcements. Today, after the daily, is going to be the After Hours Gaming League semifinal number 2 between IBM and Microsoft. Who will win? One of them. Find out after this daily. I'll be casting it live. And then Friday, I'll be playing 2v2v2v2s and mono battles with subscribers. Go to day9.tv for more info of how to hang out and play with me. And then next Friday, I'm going to play Bioshock Infinite. Next week's Fun Day Monday, if you'd be so kind as to submit to me to Monday at day9.tv, a game of you and your buddies in a 4v4 where only one of you may make units. The rest of you are going to have to stick with workers, defensive structures, and sending a whole lot of money to your ally. A couple queens are okay. Observers, overseers, these sorts of things are okay. But that's it. Alright, let's talk about ZvP. Yeah, great. I pretty much recapped what needed to be recapped at the very start. It feels really gross for Zerg in late game. In terms of the even base versus even base situation, what many Zergs are relying on are getting big edges in the mid game, as we saw in Liquid Snoot's Zerg vs. Protoss daily. I think it was 567, where we took a look at him blasting a Protoss to death with mid game army units and trying to get like 6 base versus 4 base kind of setup. Katz is going to show us something completely different, and this is how we're going to structure the daily. First, we're going to look at the absolute basic idea of Swarm Host Viper with some Infestors. That's going to be our core composition. We're going to see why it works versus these late game death armies. Then what we're going to do, in also part 1, is we're going to watch a game of Katz playing a very straightforward game doing this style. Just start to finish. In part 2, we'll look at some more longer-term games where some things go right and some things go wrong. And we'll even start to see a lot more differences in the games. Like, what if he isn't going for an aggressive strategy? What if he's going passive? What if he's going more gateway-focused? What if he's going robo? In part 2, we're going to address a lot of those sorts of things. What about the different structures? Different things that Protoss could be throwing at us. And then in the end, we're going to see some really weird games in part 3, and some semi-shaky games from Katz where he'll still stabilize. But without any further ado, not without any further ado, part 1 is going to be an intro to the concept, part 2 is going to be some variety in the concept, and part 3 is going to be this concept tested to the extreme. Swarm Host Viper. I'm going to hop into this game that you're going to note is very late game. Every single strategy that we have, any long-term strategy, should have some eventual goal that we want to get to. Now, this is the eventual goal. A lot of Swarm Hosts. We have 17 Swarm Hosts. A lot of Vipers, 8 Vipers. And a big old line of defensive structures down the middle. We have some Infestors that are lurking about somewhere here. Where are you? Where are the Infestors? I found them. I found all the Infestors. Not as many Infestors when compared to the Swarm Host and Viper, especially when you compare it to supply. Infestors 2 supply, Swarm Host 3 supply. A lot more supply in the Swarm Host Viper. That's why it is the core idea. So let me just show you an intro to why this is good versus Protoss. Let's take a look at Protoss Army. Protoss is not even maxed, but still has a real death-looking army. 6 Colossus, 9 Tempest, 1 Carrier, 7 High Templar, some Voidrays, more Carriers and Templar. How the hell does this army... How the hell is this Swarm Host... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Don't crash on me, StarCraft. Don't crash on me. No. No! Hang in there! Hang in there! Yes! Oh, thank God. Oh my God, that freaked me out. Oh, that was terrifying. Because you'll note that it's actually like 48 minutes into a game. So I didn't want to have to just load it back up and be like, oh wow, this is so funny, we're going to zoom past it. Alright, great. So here's the basic idea. These locusts will kill off any Templar that are trying to feed back the Vipers. And then we can use the Vipers to pull units forward one at a time. There are other things like how do you deal with harassment, placing a lot of spines and other defensive units around in this sort of area. But it's really the front that I want to focus on this first introductory piece. ZvP's getting into position has mainly anti-air defensive structures because it's mainly air units that the opponent is building. But watch right here. See these Templar up in front? Getting target fired, some Templar getting picked off by these locusts. Our Vipers, upon having a volley of swarm hosts, or excuse me, a volley of locusts there, can easily pick off these High Templar. If the High Templar are at the front, the locusts will kill them off. If the High Templar are not at the front, there's some other unit that's at the front. So ZvP's literally just going to get a little bit of value out of each pull at this front. So come on, let's get some interaction. Alright, here we go. Yet again, volley of locusts. Really hard to get High Templar to the front to feed back the Vipers, wherever the heck those Vipers are. Where are they? I'm losing track of units like crazy today. That's it. I'm going to find them. I found them. Excellent. So here they are floating back to the front of the battle. Obviously tempests seem like the biggest concern, but these High Templar can't really step to the front. So we start getting max value. Pulling things forward, we can use the Neural Parasite to our advantage. And here comes another High Templar trying to get into position to do a feedback. Locusts do not permit it. It's the interaction between the Swarm Hosts and the Vipers that is really key in these engagements. And in a sense, it's just free pickoffs again and again and again. Now, if Protoss wants to get cheeky and really try to drill in there and go for it, you can start fungling and dealing massive damage and this sort of thing, but simple, use the Locust to do little chipping damage, most importantly, pushing back High Templar. So here Puck's supply is rapidly plummeting. And there really doesn't seem like much that Puck can do. So, we're just going to watch this happen a little bit more. Yep, Carrier's getting out of position. Viper for the pull, Neural Parasite for the final kill. And sure, this is nice to be able to pick off a couple of defensive structures, but I mean, we're spending our gas units, the Tempests, to pick off mineral-based stuff, which are these defensive structures, and if we get a little bit out of position, or if our Templar aren't in a good spot, we can easily just get yoinked. So of course, Puck says the usual thing, how do you beat that? You're doing fine, says ZvP, to which Puck responds, no, I'm not. Continued pulling, continued pulling. There's not a lot of Corruptors here, compared to the amount of supply that's in the Swarm Hosts. So there is your basic concept. Yeah! Pretty simple in terms of its look. Alright, here's the dangerous moment. I'm going to close out this replay. Will it crash? Here's the quit. One time. Hang in there. Hang in there. I think we're okay. It's going to be the most dangerous part of this daily. Can we close replays? So, alright. What have we done thus far? We've illustrated this concept that the Death Army composition is not that difficult for Swarm Host Viper, plus some Infestors to deal with. Great. But now here's the real question. How the hell do we get to this position? How do we structure the mid-game? There's one piece to this strategy that I have not noted. On one end is the Swarm Host Viper, but if it dies, what do? On the other end, we want to be able to replenish with Ultra Hydra. Swarm Host Viper is the goal, but if we're in a sticky situation or if we start losing a lot of units, we replenish with Ultra Hydra. This is a weird explanation, but I'm going to do it all now. If our opponent is going for Colossus, Stargate, that sort of thing, they have a hard time replenishing. You can only build Colossus one at a time out of each robo. So if you lose 6 Colossi and you want to replenish them, you got to bring in 2 Colossus, and then bring in 2 Colossus, and then bring in 2 Colossus. If you're going Gateway, you can instantly warp in a huge army. If you lose 10 Archons, you can just warp in 20 Templar. It's not unreasonable to have 20 Gateways in the late game, and instantly rebuild them. Gateway units replenish quite quickly. So in other words, if you lose your Swarm Host Viper army, you can flood with Ultra Hydra, and it's really hard for someone building Stargate and Robo units to replenish quickly enough to deal with it. Or, if they do replenish with a lot of Gateway units, you have Ultra Hydra. Very effective against largely Gateway armies, very ineffective against those Robo Stargate armies. Here is a game that we're going to look at. We're going to go through it swiftly and look at 3 things. One is, how does ZvP construct a logical mid-game to get to the end game, where he has Swarm Host Viper as his main thing, but has the opportunity to go Hydra Ultralisk. Those are the big 4 pieces. Swarm Host Viper, Ultra, Hydra. Those are the 4. How does his mid-game allow for that? The second one that we're going to watch is how ZvP replenishes with Hydra Ultra should he end up losing his big Swarm Host Viper army. And third, and most importantly of all, we're going to see this Swarm Host Viper army in action. Let's hop to it. All right, great. We're going to go through this quite quickly because we want to be able to see a lot of concepts in action, not a lot of specificity of the build. In fact, what you'll see in most of these games from ZvP is that there's wildly different build orders from ZvP. There's wildly different build orders from the Protoss opponents, and yet ZvP just wiggles his way in an intuitive fashion forward. So again, our end goal, Swarm Host Viper with Ultra Hydra as an option. ZvP early expands, gets cannon rushed, forces a canceled. ZvP builds another hatchery before his pool. Do you need to do this? Hell no. We're going to look at plenty of examples where you don't have to go 4 hatch before spawning pool. ZvP even winds up in somewhat of a grody position where there's a wall off here, there's a zealot. He builds these 3 spine crawlers. We don't care about these specific details too much. In short, ZvP has a pretty typical setup. 3 bases, a lot of larvae, layer and speed incoming, and his opponent is also going to be doing something somewhat reasonable as well. Going for 2 Stargate off 1 base. Or, excuse me, 2 Stargate off 2 base. This is a common play for Protoss to make because voidrays are so powerful in the late game. A lot of players like to just get them started early. Be able to do a little harassment damage with this set of units. And then when they transition to late game, just start churning voidrays out. Now, ZvP is doing an absolutely standard HOTS mid-game. Getting the Hydralisk Den up, getting the Hydra upgrades, getting range, and playing kind of a defensive Hydra speed Zergling style. If for some reason there was a huge gateway push coming out, no problem. ZvP would just go Ling Hydra and crush the front. If there's this air army coming up, no problem. ZvP goes for this upgrade first, Groove Spines, and is just going to be defensive. And of course, nothing wrong with going for Infestor Energy. Infestors are a great unit. This is looking very much like the sort of standard transitional play. But at this point in time, ZvP is going to use a little bit of judgment. Now that I'm pretty sure I'm safe for the mid-game time, he went for clearly a lot of Stargates. I'm nearly certain as a Zerg player, I'm pretty certain we're not going to get attacked by a big ground army. He's probably going to expand and do some other stuff. We're cool for the time being. Because we are cool right now, we're going to start cutting straight into Swarm Hosts. This is one thing that's really, really nice about doing the Swarm Host-based mid-game. It's not the way it was in Wings of Liberty with Broodlords, which kind of had this feel. Oh, he got his Broodlords up in time. He's won the game. Oh, his Broodlords weren't up in time. He's dead as shit. That was not very fun to cast, right? In this circumstance, there's a full spectrum going on. I can start with a small number of swarm hosts and build up to a big number of swarm hosts. It's not just a strict moment where that happens. So great, ZvP is going to proceed to kill these rocks off, reasonable expand down here. Actually, I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I was facing a sound glitch yesterday, so I had to do the ajustement. But yeah, starting to build up the swarm hosts, playing defensively, going for a hive at a pretty typical time. And what do I mean by typical? We are about safe. We have a couple of infestors with these hydras out trying to get a really nice fungal to maybe pick some stuff off. Nothing too out of the ordinary. A lot of drones coming in. This is a kind of secret hidden component. When ZvP really starts to feel safe and go swarm host, the sort of hidden unit in swarm host Viper is drone. Same thing with Broodlord Infestor. So here we see P-Knuckles going for double Colossus production, beginning to incorporate more voidrays back into the mixture, still having a lot of phoenixes to do harassment. And out churns all those swarm hosts. Hive done. See, we're rounding out any need we might have for those ultralisks. And here we have spine crawlers, spore crawlers. We still have some of this mid-game army here. Some amount of hydras is great, especially if your opponent has some air units. So we've now seen the first thing we wanted to talk about. How on earth is ZvP staying alive? Great, he's just saying what are the components I'm trying to go for. Swarm host, Viper, Hydra, Ultra. I'll use the Hydras in the mid-game to help me stay alive. Then I'll start getting the Swarm hosts. And then everything else I'll just round out once I get my Hive Tech up. So the other big thing we wanted to see is exactly this army working really, really nicely. These evolution chambers provide a wall for the swarm host, and we can use the consume on the Vipers to devour that for a little bit of extra energy. So let's actually see this battle in motion. Not a ton of infestors, just kind of enough to do the fungals on these front lines of zealots. And here we are, yoinking in most of these key air units, not permitting them to work from afar, pulling them directly over the spore crawlers, whose health you can see because I've selected them. Some nice, strong pulls. And we can clearly see that in these engagements, it's very difficult for Protoss to come out profitably. But the last thing that we wanted to really look at today is that when this sort of army gets crunched, it's difficult for the Protoss player to replenish. Certainly because he's far behind on this resource is lost. So what we're going to do is we're just going to blast out a ton of Ultras and Hydras and start getting super aggressive. This will actually cause this unit's loss to even up, but it will allow us to maintain pressure and crush a player who's trying to do this, relying on Robo and Stargate units to stay alive, instead of relying on gateways to continue to apply pressure. Only 8 gateways, not a lot for a 4-basing Protoss. So we see this very clean execution. Swarm hosts getting so much value. And now we have this huge frickin' Ultralisk army to break through this weakened player. So there's a couple pulls on key units. LOL wow, says P-Knuckles. Swarm host just continuing to do a little chipping damage. Notice how few gateway units there are in this, and how quickly they get chewed up, as long as we have a little bit of patience. So in swings ZvP. Key units get pulled up to the front, and now ZvP can make a simple judgment call. Do I want to continue to flood Ultra Hydra? Not as efficient. This unit loss tab will even up, but they're very fast to be aggressive. Or do I want to slow down my push and replenish with Swarm Hosts? So we can see ZvP bouncing back and forth between this largely Swarm Host Viper, and then flooding Ultra Hydra, and then pulling back to more Swarm Host and whatnot. Continued pulls like this. This is one of the reasons why replenishing some Hydras is, I think, almost always essential for these sorts of defenses, because these air units can be somewhat of a pain, but that's fine. Spore, Queen, not a problem. And in the meantime, KatZ has just gobbled up the entire map. And this wasn't even a shaky defensive position either. We can easily run along this left side of the cavern and come back to this defended position. So yeah, great. Cool. Nifty. Hydra Ultra to really do the final shoves to jump through. There's the GG. Alright, nice. Again, the risky moment where he closed the replay. I hope it doesn't crash my computer. Thank goodness. Okay. So in part 1, we did 2 things. First, we introduced this cool concept of really late game Viper Swarm Host defensive structure. Couple of infestors in there too. What happens? We're just yoinking all their major, huge, heavy hitter units. And there's really no way that they can hope to break through in the way that they traditionally can. And we also got the chance to see this strategy going start to finish. We got the chance to see how KatZ got to the Swarm Hosts, and, of course, how the Swarm Host Viper was able to break through. And also we saw this ability to flip the switch into Mass Ultra Hydra to crunch through any mass reinforcement, or even do some shoving back of our own. What we're going to do in parts 2 and 3 is see a variety of different opening and mid-game situations, so we can see the different ways that we can snake our way to our final destination of Swarm Host Viper. And we'll also get to see, coming up in part 2, a longer game where there's a little bit more of a back and forth. It's not so much a straight crushing victory. So let's go to a break, and when we come back, we'll do that shit. Yeah, stay tuned! More examples. You'll never lose late game because KatZ shows you how.